Hey everyone, Inkwell Studio here, and today we've got a showdown between the self-proclaimed masterpiece or Meisterstück, the Montblanc 149, and two Chinese imposters. We've got laid out in front of us the Jinhao X159 alongside the Wingsung 630. As a pen enthusiast or collector, it's really easy to chase the dream of a perfect pen, but what if a budget-friendly version's almost as good as the high-end piece? Is it almost good enough? Or is the lack of a snowflake a deal breaker? Well, let's find out. If I go through the pens one by one, we've got the Jinhao X159, which I think most people would have identified as looking a little bit different compared to the pens below. We've then got the Wingsung 630 and, of course, the Montblanc 149 Meisterstück. I'm going to go through each pen individually and we'll go through the individual features and also the differences. So starting with the Jinhao X159, there's no snowflake on the finial. I think the one thing that does jump out is that the finial is a different size shape. Also the clip is a little bit different from the Montblanc as well. Also, key detail on this one is that I try and screw the end. This is not a piston filler. This is a cartridge converter, and the cartridge converter isn't an international standard cartridge converter. It's an oversized proprietary Jinhao converter. This nib unit does unscrew, giving you easy access. So this is a little bit similar to the Montblanc. But that's where the similarities end, really. The Montblanc, of course, is slightly heavier because it's got the piston filling mechanism inside. But overall, this is a pretty solid, robust, good replica. And for around about £10 UK or 15 US dollars, it's really hard to compete with the Jinhao. The nib wasn't quite up to scratch and I've had to tune this a little bit. But overall, a really solid, nice fountain pen. Just highlighting there, the ABS injection molding has left some lines across the body which are noticeable and you can feel. So that's the X159 from Jinhao. We then got the Wingsung 630, and held side by side, it's astounding at how close this pen is the Meisterstück. In terms of size, there is a very minor size difference and probably very minor weight difference. But in terms of overall size, feel, looks, this could definitely pass from a distance, particularly this way round, and not showing the missing snowflake on the finial. Could easily pass as the Montblanc 149. This is the slotted ink window, which is identical to the one that we have on the 149. And just like the 149, we can unscrew the nib. The nib unit is slightly different. Obviously, this is a steel nib and not a gold nib. The feed profile is slightly different, but also the lip that we have here on the nib unit, compared to the Montblanc 149 in just a second, but is one of the key differences in the build itself. And I'm not sure why Wingsung went down that design route. Maybe it's from a cost perspective, it's easier to build a unit where this piece that sits over the top is part of the nib unit rather than separate. But it just stands out as one of the differences. Piston filling mechanism, it is a little bit loose, but so is the 149 in some situations, and it extends very similarly to the 149 as well. So here we are. The Montblanc 149, slightly heavier in weight. The piston filling mechanism feels just a little bit smoother, so the build quality is there. When I took this Wingsung 630 out of the box, one of the things that jumped out at me is just the smoothness of the plastic, and they've nailed it pretty well against the Montblanc. But the Montblanc, this is a proprietary resin that Montblanc use, it does feel a little bit higher quality. There's really not that much in it, I've got to say. If I wasn't holding them in my hand comparing them, it would be very difficult to tell. Around the cap band, of course, we've got Montblanc Meisterstück number 149, as you would expect. A snowflake on a finial. And when I unscrew, an identical ink window. Got to say, the threads, the quality of the threads is just a little bit better. These threads, you can see there's some finishing pieces just not removed, not quite as high quality on the polishing of the plastic on the threads there. And then the gold nib versus the steel nib really jumps out as a big difference on the Montblanc. The scroll work and detail, this is the Wingsung 630, they've tried to replicate there as well, say 1947 instead of the height of Montblanc. But just compare that to the Jinhao. The Jinhao, the kind of two-tone effect there, they've tried to replicate, but the scroll work is quite different. And they haven't tried to replicate any of the numbering or markings on there. So then on to the nib unit. I said that this was quite different to the Wingsung. So you'll see that these units are on hand tightened, that there are grooves in the Wingsung and the Montblanc, which are slightly different to each other, so you can't use the same tool to tighten them beyond hand tight. You can see there's no lip on this. The actual lip is on this, on the main body itself, on the Meisterstück. The difference between the Montblanc and the Wingsung really comes down to build quality differences, where over the ink window, when I first pick these up, if I've taken the nibs off them, they look almost identical. With closer inspection, you'll see just the differences on the profiling of the threads and the finish there. When you run your hand over the ink window, there's a slight lip on this, and it could have been polished down just a little bit more on the Wingsung, whereas on the Montblanc, it's absolutely smooth. Also, when we come to the piston filling mechanism, the Montblanc piston cap is absolutely flush with the main body. On the Wingsung, if I turn this round to illustrate, we actually have a slight indent here where it moves inwards, and that is a noticeable difference. And just looking at the nibs there, when you pick them up immediately, the bright brilliance of the gold on the Montblanc is really noticeable against the slightly duller steel. So how do they write? This one is the Jinhao X159. You get the idea of the line variation thickness. This being a £10, 15 US dollar pen, you may find that the nib isn't quite up to scratch. When you receive it, you may need to tune it. Buying a replacement isn't as easy at the moment as it could be, and I'd like to see more replacement nibs on the market. So if you do get a lemon, there are some options there for you. At the moment, one of the only options is to buy another pen and roll the dice on that, or to try and tune it yourself, or send it off to a nibmeister. Next, we've got the Wingsung. Now, again, with the Wingsung, this one was a little bit scratchy for me. So what I've actually done is ground this a bit into more of a stub or italic type style nib and taken most of that tipping material off that seemed to be causing a lot of issues for me. I've got a comparison here for you though, which is the stock nib. Now this is John's nib from pensharing.com, and this nib is beautiful, and he assures me that this is the nib straight out the box, and it writes amazingly. and is much more what I would expect. There we go. So beautiful nib to write with. Rolling the dice again on the one that you get. But you can grind. Also, you can find replacements a little bit easier than the Jinhao, but I still struggled to find one for that. So I'm waiting for a replacement nib. Now this is going to be the biggest difference here because we've been comparing steel against gold, which is never a fair comparison. A lot of gold nibs do stand up against their gold counterparts. I do find though, with the Montblanc, my biggest takeaway on this is that this nib is absolutely exceptional. This is the medium nib. I can zoom in for you. This is the medium nib. It's very wet, very juicy, no real line variation, which is what you would expect. A lot wetter than the Wingsung. And really an absolute joy to write with. This really does just glide over the page, and it's difficult to describe. This is with very little pressure, and there's very little feedback. So there we have it. Writing tests. Nibs are always going to be different, so that's maybe a difficult comparison. As I lay them out there, if you wanted a pen that looks very much like the Montblanc 149, I'm looking at them without having the snowflake exposed. It's really difficult to see which one I'm actually picking up there. The subtlety in the differences of the clips, in the writing on the clip bands, and then the finials, and the tapering around the piston is relatively minor. For me, the big standout there is the nib. And if that nib from the 149 was available to buy and would fit into the Wingsung 630, I think you'd have a winner there, but obviously would drive up the price quite significantly. There you have it. If you want a pen that looks the part, the Wingsung 630 isn't going to do you wrong. But it really comes back to that question that I posed at the start. Is almost good enough for you? Or is the lack of a snowflake a real deal breaker? And from a pen collector's perspective, not having the snowflake in your collection may be the deal breaker. But the price of a Montblanc versus the others, £10 or $15, about £30, which is about 35 to 40 US dollars, versus £850 UK or roughly 1,000 US dollars, the price jump is absolutely enormous. So what do you think? Would you go for the Montblanc 149, or would you choose the Wingsung 630 as good enough and use the savings for something else? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and a huge thanks to pensharing.com, where I was able to borrow the Montblanc 149 from one of their generous members. It's a great community for pen enthusiasts to connect, share, and experience different pens. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out my other videos.